inspire, connect,
resource, growing healthy churches
is in relationship for God's mission.
Well, hi, I'm Joth Hunt. I'm one of the team at SCBA, and I've got the privilege this afternoon to chat to Rachel Gardner, who's all the way up in Preston. So it's remarkable how technology can connect people so many miles apart.
You know, Joth, I think the internet goes around the world. I've just discovered that. I mean, this is amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. So it's great that we can connect together like this. Rachel, let me get you to introduce yourself because I've worked out that you are a youth worker, a speaker, a director, a president, an author, and I was going to call you a pastor or a church leader or a pioneer. What are you? Who are you? Oh, and a campaigner as well, I've got written down here.
Oh, right. Okay, so the cheeky answer is I'm an extrovert southerner in a northern city. The more worthy one is I'm a daughter of God who's trying to work all this stuff out, really. But so I've been a youth worker for about 20 years, and that is such, I just love being a youth worker, and I will be a youth worker until the day I die. I don't think God's going to graduate me out of it. I think it's such a precious calling. I'm married to Jason. He is an ordained vicar in the Church of England, and 4 months before lockdown started, Jason and I moved with our kids to Preston in the northwest, and we're part of an HTB resource church plant here into the city. And I work for Youthscape. I'm the director of national partnerships, working with youth workers and churches around the UK. And yes, I'm sort of it's a patron role. I'm president of the Girls Brigade, which means I have no power. They just allow me to be a bit gobby on their behalf and to cheer on the wonderful uniformed youth ministry, which I think often is an untapped resource really in the church. So that's me. We have 2 adopted children, and I'm also learning to be a home educator at the moment in lockdown.
I just feel exhausted. I did a little bit of research, and I thought my life was full, and then I looked at yours and thought, oh my life, how on earth have you managed to fit all this in to your life? Because it must feel like a whirlwind, doesn't it?
Well, I think that's the exciting thing, Joth. I'm sure every leader listening to this, we have portfolio lives, don't we? Like, we have something that often we feel God has called us to fairly early on, that in a way is unchanging. It could be like pastoring a church, or for me, youth ministry. But the real privilege in the kingdom of God is that often we're allowed to kind of throw our weight behind other things that we're really passionate about, or God gives us an opportunity to do. So I think it's been an extraordinary privilege, for this southerner extrovert activist to be let loose on some things that I get really excited about and fill me with hope. So one of the other things I do is I'm part of Home for Good. So Krish Kandai.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I was one of the founding trustees of Home for Good. Both our children are adopted. And so it's really exciting seeing the many different ways that God's people are good news in the community. So I think I just like jumping in buses that are going to cool places and doing cool stuff, really.
Let me take you back to the beginning, because I kind of identify with you because you grew up in Sussex, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
And I grew up on the coast, Seaford.
Ooh.
So
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and you grew up in a Christian family, as far as I understand, which I grew up in a Christian family as well. But actually, your Christian upbringing was a bit strange because you didn't seem to live anywhere. You kind of wandered around. You were a bit nomads. Was that right?
Nomads. So my parents became Christians when I was tiny, and joined a beautiful Baptist church in Weston-super-Mare. And this wonderful church had this police officer and maths teacher and little baby join the church, and they just would love them and were amazing. And my dad very quickly got the sense that God was calling him out of the police force and into church leadership. He was a young baby Christian. They went to Bible college, and then God messed up their lives from then on in, which is the beautiful thing the Holy Spirit does. Like any plans you have, the Holy Spirit loves to disrupt for greater things. So we began to dabble as a church leader. But when I was about 12, my parents just really felt God say very clearly, it was time to leave the pastorate they were in. They were very happy there. The church was growing, but they just felt God say it's time to go. And they didn't sense what God was saying next. So for 4 years, we were effectively homeless, because as many of you listening know, your housing is tied up with your job, which throws up all sorts of conundrums, doesn't it, of the calling and what God is saying. And so we sofa surfed a bit, and we lived with this wonderful old man called Ernie, and my parents delivered yellow pages around Lewis.
Yes.
Lived in Heathfield. I mean, looking back now, as an adult, myself with 2 children, I think it's okay sometimes to say, I wonder if I might have done that differently. I was angry with my parents, actually. I found it very difficult that God's call on their life meant that we didn't have anything. And it was very hard for my parents. I watched my mum really struggle emotionally with it. But what I saw through the midst of it all was that when you follow Jesus, it's your whole life. It's your whole life. And although I was angry and I felt annoyed I didn't have the stuff that my friends had, now in my 40s, I realised the treasures that I was given in those moments by having dear parents that I knew loved me and I knew put me and my brothers' welfare very, they were really caring for us. But they wanted above all things to be faithful to Jesus. And that gift, for me, I think, has been more precious than anything else. So we ended up at Ashburnham Place, because I think the staff, the community there said, oh, for goodness sake, will somebody give this family somewhere to live? So we ended up there. My parents are still there and love.
Are they still there? Great.
They are.
Oh,
My dad
fantastic.
loves preaching in the local churches. He serves all across the East Sussex, and my mum looks after the volunteers that work there. And so it's good, good stuff.
So tell me, how do you get from Ashburnham Place to things like the Romance Academy, being on the BBC, ending up at Youthscape, and being president of the GB? I mean, how can we talk about that in a nutshell? But it's quite a journey, isn't it?
It is. And as a teenager, I think I was a bit of a failed teenager. I wasn't very cool at all. I didn't have serious rebelling moments. And had you said to me as a teenager I was going to work with young people, I'd have run a mile, because I was terrified of young people when I was a young person. And it wasn't that I was a shy teenager, but I was a deeply uncertain teenager. And I found my teenage years both brilliant, waking up to your sense of possibility, who you are, but also terrifying, like realizing there's a whole code of conduct out there and a way to fit in, and I didn't fit it. So I think I just said yes to the next thing. I joined a musical company after school. I went touring around Spain and Portugal. I was ready to chuck in the towel with my faith. I'd outgrown Christianity. I'd fallen in love with a guy who was into Sufism, which is a very mystic form of Islam. I was too big for God and Jesus. That was stuff of my childhood. And Jesus met me really powerfully in a dusty yard in Portugal. 2 very close friends had traumatic events happen to them. And even though I'd been through all that with my parents, there came a point where I had to decide for myself, am I going to follow Jesus? Because if I am, it's 100%. And if I'm not, I'm 100% going in the opposite direction. And so I think when I was about 18, 19, I made that decision. I'm going to follow you, Jesus. I don't know all the answers. And I think sometimes in our Christian life, we have moments of real certainty, don't we? That, we really know God answered our prayer. We really know he's with us. Other times we don't have certainty, but we have clarity. Like, I haven't got all the answers, but it's very clear to me I have a choice. And I think when I was about 19, the certainty I'd built my Christian faith on was beginning to crumble. It was built on things like nice things happen to good people. And in the end, everything will be okay. And I was facing a few things personally that didn't feel like that. And but I saw with real clarity, you either hold on to Jesus, he is either everything, or you absolutely let go. And again, looking back, I'm very grateful for those moments of clarity, because I think I stepped into adulthood saying, well, I'm going to follow you, Jesus, wherever this takes. So that led me I went to Bible college. I met Joth Gardner.
Yeah, but you went to, London School of Theology.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to London Bible College when it was a proper college.
So I think we might, honestly, you and me, our lives, do
Yeah, well, almost. And then I went to do schools ministry. My first ministry was in schools ministry at Chelmsford.
You're my new best friend. This is amazing.
Yeah, but you have poured your energy and time into youth work all the way through. I mean, once I was in my 40s, I was pastoring a Baptist church. In fact, actually, no, well, yeah, just at 42. You're 42, 43, something like that. Is that right? Yeah, yeah. So I was just about moving to Eastleigh at that time, down into Hampshire. So we haven't quite walked a similar path. Well, we've walked a similar path, but not the same one. But you've been passionate about young people all the way through that time. Did that start at London School of Theology?
I think it did, because again, I was very resistant to do anything with young people because I felt I was, it wasn't good for me then. But I remember doing a church, you'll know this, a church history essay. I think I got 2 out of 20 for it. I was appalling at it. And I was in my room, in one of the halls of residence, answering these questions. And I suddenly had this overwhelming sense of God saying to me, who is going to reach them? And I wasn't even writing about, I think I was writing about Anabaptists. I wasn't even writing about young people, but I knew instinctively what God was saying. And I just said a tentative, yes, okay then. And as I left London School of Theology, London Bible College, I moved back to Eastbourne and just got the first job going. I'd done a little bit of schools work at Bible College, and I began to work with a Christian organisation out of the YWCA in Eastbourne. And I set up girls groups in Seaford, in Eastbourne, in Hastings, Brighton, just around girls' emotional and mental health. Not really realising that God was stirring something in me big. And I think in those moments, Joth, I realised, oh, of course the gospel makes sense in a little youth club in Seaford, in Brighton, Helsham, when all you're talking about is periods and food. Like, the gospel has something to say. The gospel has legs and hands here. And I think I began to get really captivated at seeing the difference that Jesus makes. I hadn't made those connections before. And Bible College, I always encourage people to go and do a degree in theology. I think the best training for any youth worker is go and do a degree in theology. I think it's so important that our youth ministers are fluent in theology and feel confident, to handle God's wonderful word with the revelation of the Spirit. But I just loved it. And so I did my sexual health training in Brighton. HIV, the AIDS epidemic was massive around then. I was, wrestling with big issues as a Christian, with sexual health stuff. Then I moved to London, got a job as a schools worker, and the teenagers called me the God sex lady, because one minute I was doing their RE lesson, the next minute I was doing an assembly around sexual health. And I was just like working this out and thought, actually, there's no tension in the kingdom of God between talking about our physical health and our spiritual health. We can actually talk about it all. Like, God cares about all of this. And I think for me, young people have always been that wonderful melting pot where they will honestly bring their questions about anything. And I think that's probably why I love youth ministry so much, because I get to see front row vision. This is what it looks like when the power of the gospel, breaks into people's lives. It's just, young people will dare to ask things often as adults who've learned to not ask anymore.
Hey, you don't seem to have lost an ounce. If not, perhaps you've gained loads more of passion for young people. It's almost as if it's still fresh there from that moment you were trying to write that terrible essay.
Oh, bless you! Thank you. I think I am excited. I think I find I've been a youth worker for 20 years, and I would say that probably every 5 years I've had to kind of almost close down the youth ministry that I've been doing in my thoughts and think, right, this is a new generation. Because I think the generations are moving very, very rapidly. So I think the way I did youth ministry 20 years ago is definitely different now. But the consistent thread is that so often Jesus calls people to himself in the teenage years. And when you're with young people who are, daring to go against the flow and dare to name Jesus as their friend and their saviour, that you're sat with radicals, even if on the outside they look like they're a bit passive and, but actually, they're here, they're interested, they're engaged. There's no nominalism among teenagers, no nominalism. Like even the ones that are driven to the church youth group by a parent who literally, puts them in the seat and waits outside for them. That young person, if they don't want to be there, will communicate to you they don't want to be there.
Yeah, you're
so
right.
you know immediately who you've got to work with. And I think that gives an extraordinary rawness for the work that you do. I would say that leading a church of adults to me feels like the biggest challenge. I don't know how any of you do it. I don't know how you do it, because adults learn the codes and they wear a mask and they don't tell you what's really going on. Like young people
that's
tell
true.
you. And if they don't tell you, their Instagram account tells you.
Oh, I love that. That's great. Let's talk about the church, because in that interview with Christianity, you said that 75% of churches don't have any young people. That was back in 2018. Has that got worse? Has it got better as far as you know? And what's the challenge hidden behind that for us?
Really sadly, post-lockdown, I think we're going to find even less young people in churches. And I think what our bit of research, so we did a poll survey of over 3,000 churches from Youthscape. We contacted over 3,000 churches across the denominations. So it's not one particular tribe or denomination. And we found that 75% don't have any young people sort of regularly as part of the church. They might have one young person that comes once every 6 months when Granny brings them, but they have no young people that they would say, oh yes, they're part of our church. Of the 25% that do have young people, only 5% of that group would say they do anything that they would call youth ministry. So a large group would say, well, we have 3 teenagers and they just sit at the back, or they sing in the choir. Now, singing in the choir can be a great discipleship tool, or it can't be, but only 5% of these churches said, we have a curriculum, we have volunteers that do stuff, we create space, we think about young people when we create strategy and programs. And that was devastating, but not unsurprising, because youth ministry is difficult. It is hard. And I do think during this season of lockdown, every week at Youthscape, we've polled groups of young people and we've polled youth workers. We've called them the 3x3, we've asked 3 questions. And each sample has been quite small, so you have to be careful what you extrapolate from it. But what we found is, whereas the narrative in the wider church during lockdown has been, 1 in 5 people are praying now, more people are buying Bibles, more people are checking out church online. What we found with youth ministry is that youth ministry's got something very small. So the youth workers that are doing stuff online are exhausted and they feel they're doing a terrible job. They've lost the fringe youth, they've just got the core youth, and some of those aren't connecting. They might be communicating and holding on to them, but they don't feel they're discipling, and they definitely don't think they're doing any outreach. Schools work has completely ceased. Work has completely ceased. How do you go and find young people if you're an adult? How do you go and find them online? Just think of all the safeguarding nightmares around that. So the exciting thing that comes out of that is suddenly we've always said, let's raise up the next generation to be, your language, Joth, which I love, emerging disciples, and really equip them in evangelism. Well, now we're going to need to do that as a real desperation, well, a real urgency, because actually young people are in spaces that only they are in. And who knows what schools work will look like in the future. It might reopen up again for us, but it might not. And so I think it is a very important time. If you have youth workers in your church, please begin to see them as senior leadership leaders in your strategy. Really involve them, ask them to tell you what they are seeing, and use them as part of the core leadership of your church, because they will be struggling, they'll be having low morale, but it's really important what happens.
I think some years back, some decades back, this is my feeling, is that we as churches stopped investing in our young people and recognising that you need to invest heavily in the next generation. Is that something that rings with you?
I do agree with you, and I think it was slightly twinned with the professionalisation of youth ministry. So I am absolutely all for professional courses and the safeguarding, the governance. Like, safeguarding young people is a gospel issue. It's not separate to it. Like, we've got to keep young people safe. That's what Jesus asked of us, not just the state. But I think we then sort of said, well, there is the professional youth worker who we can employ. We'll outsource their development, and then we'll employ them, but we'll not employ them to a job spec. We'll employ them to a wish list. I mean, every church leader listening to this, basically, your church holds you to a wish list, don't they? Not to a job spec. And I think because of that, we were seeing that these lovely youth workers that were emerging from colleges still need a lot of support. This is their first job in the workplace. This might be their first time away from their home or their home church. So they're exploring, what does it mean to be part of a church community, but also to be a leader? I haven't got any friends here. So I think we're seeing now just almost the perfect storm that happened, Joth. The church stepped back, professionalism stepped up, and often the young youth worker was suffered in the midst of that, and sometimes sadly the youth ministry suffered. There have been some brilliant stories, of course, and some excellent youth ministry that has emerged, but I think we do need to be real about where we're at now and what it needs. And our thing at Youthscape is that in reality we're not seeing 50,000 paid youth workers coming over the horizon to save the day, but what we do see is that there will be in churches adults who, with the right support and training, could actually step up to be fantastic disciple makers of the next generation. And it needs to be the whole church stepping up, really. Yeah,
I mean, in my day, we didn't have paid youth workers. They were all, lay leaders, volunteers. The David Greenwoods of this world just gave their life. They did bank management during the day, and in the evening, they just gave themselves to crusaders to be serving boys, and I'm just so grateful to that. It was a whole life thing, and he never was ordained or anything like that. Now you're gonna be spending the 1st of July helping us think through some of these issues about young people right in this moment, and I love the fact that you've kind of mentioned COVID and the impact that that's having on youth outreach and ministry and development of young people and so forth. So I don't want to tie you down to anything too much now, but just give us a taster of some of the thoughts that you might be bringing to kind of draw us in.
Oh, thank you. I'm so looking forward to being with you. And I'm really glad that the way we're doing it means that I might get to see some of your faces and get a little bit of chat going, because that means a lot to me. I struggle a bit when it's just me speaking to my face and then somebody out there at some point is connecting. I want it to feel a little bit more real and immediate, to really serve you, because God has called you. And God, you are God's particular favourite people, aren't you? Because you're leading his beautiful church and loving his church. So I take very seriously my responsibility to give you good stuff and speak well into your hearts and to encourage you in this really difficult time. So what I'm going to do on the light of that is the first 25 minutes is going to be doom and gloom. Just doom and gloom.
Can't wait.
But the first section, I'd like us to just look at sort of 4 or 5 key reasons why emerging generations, so we're talking under 25s, why it is not self-evident to them that the biblical narrative, the kingdom of God, that the gospel is for them. What is it that's in culture? What are the big stories, the big themes, the big monsters really in culture that we as leaders need to be aware of? I nick this from Jonathan Grant, who's written Divine Sex, and he says leaders today need to be able to have a thick description of their times. And so that's what we're going to be doing the first 25 minutes, a sense of thick description. What is this time that we're leading in? And there'll be a good chunk of time for you in small groups to discuss that in your context, like you're the experts in your context. And then the second half is getting excited about, well, actually, what are the opportunities that are unique to this generation as we as church learn to pivot, is the new phrase, isn't it? As we suddenly take church wholesale online, like who'd have thought that the church in the UK would be able to do that? But we've had to do that because we've had to adapt. So what are some of the other things that we always thought we'd never be able to do, but we've just shown that we can? We'll be talking about the difference between what it looks like to adapt well and to innovate well. So adapting is, we didn't think we'd do it ever or yet, but we've had to. Innovate is, we don't have to do it, but we're going to do it. And somewhere in between those two, there's a sweet spot, isn't there, around actually seriously reaching emerging generations. You've mentioned, Joth, we need to pour more resources to our work with young people. You're ahead of the game there. There's a great guy called James Emery White who's written a book called Meet Generation Z, and he's a church pastor in the States. And he says that churches will naturally grow old. We haven't got to try. We haven't got to think, let's have a strategy where we just get older. We'll do that without thinking. A church will not naturally grow younger. If we want to reach emerging generations, if we want more diversity in our churches, it won't just happen because we want it to happen. We have to take steps to make that happen. So we'll be thinking about, how do we skew younger? How do we do it? And the good news is, it's not about us who are over the age of 40 going into early retirement. In fact, there's a very specific role that those of us in our 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s desperately need to play to make sure that what the next generation inherit from us is healthy and good and enables them to really lead God's church. So we're going to be talking about how the future is in Jesus' hands. We can't predict the future, but what we can do is create the culture that says yes to whatever's next. So, and then the last bit will be a big old Q&A, and then I think, Joth, you've said that you're going to send Deliveroo lunch to everybody that comes. Is that right? Is that the deal? If they get to that whole morning with me, they get free lunch.
Absolutely, of course.
Rachel, thanks for that last comment. No, Rachel, I'm really inspired. I'm really looking forward to the day, and thank you for your time today, this afternoon, just to, give us a taster of what you'll be touching on, which is such a key and important subject and area that we as church leaders, those responsible for the church, need to grapple with and work with and invest time and energy into. So we're really looking forward to. Thank you for bringing all your experience, all your expertise. Wherever you are, whether you're a youth worker, speaker, campaigner, pastor, I don't know, author, wherever you are, we're just looking forward with you inputting into our conversation. It's really, really helpful. Thank you. And enjoy the rest of your time.
Thank you, Joth.
Inspire, connect,
Resource. Growing healthy churches.
is in relationship for God's mission.